Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a totally mind-bending paradigm shift about the fundamental nature of, well, everything. So, go ahead and forget everything you think you know about matter, space, and the universe for a minute. We're looking at a source text that completely rips up the floorboards of reality and replaces our everyday assumptions with something profoundly different. Let's just get right into it.
Okay, here's the core text we're breaking down today. It says, reality is an infinitely recursive, omnidimensional informational knowledge system whose self-consistent integration generates physical laws, complexity, life, consciousness, and knowledge. Reality is not built from objects but from recursively integrated informational relationships across whole infinity. Yeah, I know. If your brain just kind of short-circuited trying to process that, you are definitely not alone. It's a massive, incredibly dense 2 sentences right out of the gate. You're probably sitting there thinking, wait, what does that actually mean? And fair enough. Terms like omnidimensional informational knowledge system sound like they belong in some hyper-advanced physics paper from the distant future. But hey, that's exactly why we're here. We are going to methodically deconstruct this absolute unit of a concept. We'll take it piece by piece, word by word, until it actually clicks and makes intuitive sense.
To do that, here's our roadmap. We're covering the core of reality, escaping the object illusion, the infinite recursive architecture, self-consistent integration, generating life and laws, and finally, embracing whole infinity.
Starting with Part 1, the core of reality, an informational knowledge system.
So to really grasp this, we have to start at the absolute foundation. We need to completely rewrite our definition of the universe. The text doesn't say reality is a physical place. It's not some giant empty box filled with rocks and gas. At its base level, reality is strictly an informational knowledge system. Think about it less like a physical container and more like the underlying code of a massive video game. It's an active, computing network. Information is the actual bedrock, and everything else is just software running on top of it. It's a system that doesn't just hold things. It knows, it processes, it computes.
Which brings us to Part 2, escaping the object illusion, redefining the building blocks.
This is where the text hits us with what reality is not. And honestly, this is probably the hardest habit we have to break. We are so used to a world built out of distinct objects, right? Tables, planets, atoms. But the source makes this incredibly bold claim. Reality is actually forged from recursively integrated informational relationships. There are literally no separate objects. The things we think we see, that's an illusion. What really exists are dynamic connections. It's kind of like a knot in a rope. The knot isn't a separate object from the rope, it's just a relationship of the fibers. You aren't an object in a universe. You're a highly complex knot of informational relationships.
All right, Part 3, the infinite recursive architecture, decoding the jargon.
Let's tackle that intimidating vocabulary from the very first sentence. First up, infinitely recursive. Recursion is basically when something repeats by feeding back into itself. The text is telling us that these foundational informational relationships are continuously repeating, looping, and building on themselves forever. Think of a fractal, or when you stand between 2 mirrors and see that endless reflection. The rules governing the tiniest, microscopic relationships are the exact same rules looping all the way up to govern the largest scales of the cosmos. It's a perfectly repeating, endless pattern.
And that leads right into omnidimensional. Now, we're used to navigating 3 dimensions of space and 1 of time. But this system, it doesn't care about those limits. Omnidimensional means it spans across all possible dimensions and scopes. It scales from the infinitely small to the unfathomably huge. As the text puts it, it encompasses whole infinity. And notice they spell it with a capital Y at the end there to really hammer home the absolute unbound scale of this thing. It is everywhere, in every direction, across every possible state of existence.
Moving on to Part 4, self-consistent integration, the engine of existence.
So you might be wondering, if reality is this massive, infinitely repeating web of relationships, how does it not just instantly collapse into total chaos? The secret sauce is self-consistent integration. This means every single relationship fits together perfectly without a single contradiction. It's like a limitless mathematical equation that just balances flawlessly every time. The logic of the whole system integrates perfectly. If it wasn't self-consistent, the universe would just break down into static. But because all these recursive loops integrate so perfectly with each other, the system is completely stable. It's literally an engine of perfect logical harmony.
Part 5, Generating Life and Laws, the Causal Chain.
This is where it gets really incredible, because we're transitioning from the abstract math of reality to the tangible stuff we actually experience every day. Let's walk through the evolutionary staircase from the text. Because this system hits that perfect self-consistent integration, it inevitably spits out outputs. First, it generates physical laws, the basic rules of the game. Those laws interact, creating massive complexity. Over time, that complexity organizes into life. Then, life processes information and awakens into consciousness. And finally, consciousness looks out at the universe and generates knowledge. It's just a breathtaking causal chain. Gravity, biology, your own mind. They aren't random accidents. According to this paradigm, they are the direct, inevitable results of an infinitely recursive informational system, achieving perfect integration.
And finally, part 6, embracing whole infinity, your place in the pattern. Let's zoom back out and connect these huge concepts directly to you. The text concludes by reminding us that all of this is recursively integrated across whole infinity. This isn't just a fun thought experiment happening out there in the void. Remember that causal chain we just talked about? The system generates consciousness and knowledge. That means the very consciousness you are using to listen to my voice right now, the knowledge you are gaining by hanging out with me for this explainer, all of that is an active part of this system. You aren't separate from the universe observing it from the outside. You literally are the informational system recursively looping back to observe and understand itself. You are integrated into this whole infinity.
Which leaves us with a pretty wild thought to chew on. If the universe isn't made of objects, but of informational relationships, and if you are the active, knowing consciousness generated by this infinite system, then how are your relationships shaping whole infinity? Because every connection you make, every piece of information you process, is just another recursive loop in the grand architecture of reality. Thanks so much for diving into the deep end with me today on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.